This is the main news of Korea today. The Cargo Solidarity headquarters of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, which has been protesting against product shipments at 3 Haejinro plants, occupied the headquarters of Haejinro in Gangnam-gu, Seoul on the 16th. According to the police and the Public Transport Union, about 100 members of the Korea Cargo Workers Union began a sit-in protest on the rooftop of the headquarters of Haejinro in Seoul earlier in the day. Police are at the scene and no physical clashes have yet occurred. The strike began in March when 130 cargo owners from Seok-Yeol Logistics, a cargo consignee of Haejinro, joined the Cargo Alliance and demanded a hike in transportation fees. Seok-Yeol Logistics is an affiliate of Haejinro and has a 100% stake in Haejinro. Earlier, the labor union has demanded a 30% increase in fares, an increase in empty hospital fares, and a payment of advertising expenses for vehicles. Those who entered the sit-in on the same day are also demanding the termination of the contract of 12 union members, a lawsuit for damages filed against them, and the withdrawal of an injunction for obstruction of business. The Korea Cargo Workers Solidarity has been staging sit-ins at its Haejinro plants in Ikon, Gyeonggi Province, and Cheongju, North Chungcheong Province, and began a strike at its plant in Gangwon Province from the 2nd of this month. Haejinro has stopped shipping and producing products several times as the labor union mobilized trucks to block access to each factory. In this regard, Haejinro announced a hardline response, including legal measures, saying that the Cargo Alliance is interfering with the management's business, and immediately started to implement it. On June 24, the first negotiation table was set up between the Korea Cargo Solidarity and Seok-Yeol Logistics, but 132 members of the Korea Cargo Solidarity were notified of the termination of the contract. The management has also submitted an application to the court for an injunction to prohibit business interference related to rallies at Ikon and Cheongju factories. The exact extent of the damage caused by the strike has yet to be estimated. However, Haejinro believes that it suffered billions of won in damage as the strike continued for months. As the strike is prolonged, related incidents are also occurring everywhere. According to Haejinro officials, a driver who collided with an illegally parked truck in front of the factory's main gate died in the early morning of the 12th of last month. In addition, a delivery vehicle leaving the factory at night damaged the windshield, and on the 4th of this month, 5 members of the union who resisted the police's attempt to disperse the protest jumped under the height bridge in front of the Gangwon plant and were rescued by water rescue teams. On the 5th of this month, the next day, it was also reported that truckers threatened to drive vehicles that shipped products individually from the Gangwon plant. About 10 of the people who occupied the headquarters of Haejinro headed to the rooftop with thinner, a flammable substance. Amid 2 accidents in which dozens of beer bottle boxes poured out in downtown Chuncheon, Gangwon Province, in the past 2 months, both accidents are known to have been caused by the same driver, raising controversy. Dozens of boxes of beer poured from a truck driving in Chuncheon on the morning of the 12th, causing a mess in the road area. Fortunately, with the help of surrounding citizens, the road was quickly cleared in 30 minutes. However, criticism has been raised as the truck driver is known to be the driver of the same accident in Chuncheon in June. At that time, Obi Brewery visited the citizens who helped him with the settlement and thanked them. Although one person caused 2 accidents one after another, the liquor company says the trucker has nothing to do with the issue, saying it is not a direct contractual relationship with them. There are growing calls for strengthening management of cargo trucks over the accident. In addition, some point out that education is urgently needed in relation to the transportation of trucks. According to the Trucking Transportation Business Act, transportation business operators must take necessary measures such as cover, packaging, and fixing devices in accordance with the standards and methods prescribed by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport Ordinance to prevent loaded cargo from falling. The Road Traffic Act also stipulates that all vehicles should not be driven in a loaded state beyond safety standards with respect to their loading weight and loading capacity. With the launch of the party's emergency committee on the 16th, the Power of the People decided to reappoint Kwon Sung-dong, the floor leader, at a general meeting of lawmakers. Representative Kwon, who was in crisis due to his disparaging remarks on 9th-grade government officials and the internal shooting text message scandal, took a breather with his reappointment. However, the emergency committee led by Ju Ho-young, chairman of the emergency committee, will start with a big task to close the severe ruling party conflict, including an injunction filed by former party leader Lee Jun-sok. The Power of the People proceeded to vote anonymously with floor leader Kwon leaving, and lawmakers decided to reappoint floor leader Kwon. Chairman Ju Ho-young met with reporters after the general meeting and said, "We have not confirmed the number, but it has been decided that there are overwhelmingly many votes for reconfidence." The emergency committee officially anchored the list of emergency committee members. Ju announced the list of 6 emergency committee members, excluding 3 ex officio emergency committee members, including himself, floor leader Kwon, and policy committee chairman Seok-Yeol, at a standing national committee meeting held shortly after the General Assembly. First-term lawmakers Tae-Young and Jeon Ju-hai were included, and former lawmakers Chung Yang-sok, who served as re-elected lawmakers, also joined. Former Gwangju mayor candidate Ju Ki-won, Gangwon-do council member Choi Jae-min, and Dae-Jung City Council member Lee So-hee were on the list as outside figures. Former candidate Ju, a former investigator at the Supreme Prosecutor's Office and worked with President Yoon, was also controversial when his son was known to work in the presidential office. In response, Chairman Ju said, the former candidate Ju placed great importance on the representation of Honam, which earned 15.9% during the local elections in Gwangju, our party's inferior region. Park Deok-hyum, a three-term lawmaker who was under controversy over the alleged order for the construction of the investigated institution, was reportedly appointed as the Secretary General in charge of the party's management. South Korea and the U.S. will conduct pre-training for the UFS Yulji Freedom Shield joint training from the 16th. The main practice of UFS will be held from the 22nd to September 1st. The Joint Chiefs of Staff announced in the UFS joint training that it would rebuild the Korea-U.S. alliance by normalizing outdoor maneuvers that were reduced and adjusted for a considerable period of time during the Moon Jae-in administration. According to military officials, South Korea and the U.S. will conduct crisis management training, a preliminary training stage of UFS, for 4 days from that day. Crisis management training is a process in which the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces Command master the process of managing crisis situations that have a significant impact on national security so that they do not spread to war. Regarding the training, which will be held from the 22nd, the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we will improve the ability to carry out joint operations by conducting tactical outdoor maneuvers at each discharge and function during the joint training period. He explained that the military will conduct training to actually maneuver, not the simulation method that has been conducted in recent years. Specifically, a total of 13 joint outdoor maneuvers will be conducted, including scientific combat, attack helicopter shooting, WMD removal, commercial bridge construction, explosive disposal, front armament and fuel resupply, joint fire operation, special warfare exchange, maritime patrol operation and mobile construction. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said, since 2019, various outdoor maneuvers, which have been distributed throughout the year, are intended to maximize the results of the drills and show off the Korea-U.S. alliance at home and abroad. Regarding UFS, he then stressed that it is an exercise of a defensive nature that has been conducted annually. UFS is the name introduced this year. The JCS explained that freedom is an expression of a strong will to protect freedom, the value of the Korea-U.S. alliance, and that the shield is a defensive exercise that aims for peace. He said, it is a name that fits the values pursued by the Korea-U.S. alliance and the purpose of implementing the joint training. The former names were Yulji Focus Lens UFL from 1976 to 2007 and Yulji Freedom Guardian UFG from 2008 to 2018. After the 2018 U.S. North Korea Summit in Singapore, from 2019 to 2021, it was the CCPT for the Joint Command Center training. The CCPT is a direct expression of the Joint Combat Staff training at the command post, and there was an assessment that it was not suitable as a name for a large-scale military exercise conducted to enhance deterrence against North Korea and establish a joint defense posture, the JCS explained. In this exercise, the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we will ensure stable conditions for the transition of wartime operational control through FOC evaluation of the full operational capabilities of the future alliance under the Condition-Based Wartime Operational Control Plan. The FOC evaluation corresponds to the intermediate stage of the three-stage evaluation, including the Basic Operational Capability IOC, FOC, and FMC, to evaluate the performance of the battlefield operations of the future alliance led by the 4-star general of the Korean military. Apart from the Korea-U.S. joint drills since 2019, the UFS Part 1 military drill will be implemented by integrating the Yulji training, a government exercise focused on non-military crises such as disasters, and training procedures for crisis management and joint operations. It will be an opportunity to improve the nation's ability to carry out all-out war by integrating government and military drills, the JCS said. In addition, it will apply practical scenarios that can occur during wartime to reflect new war patterns in Ukraine, such as drones and cybers, to joint operational drills between South Korea and the U.S. assuming the enemy's attack on major industrial facilities such as ports, airports, semiconductor factories, and important national facilities. Defense drills and damage recovery drills will also be held at the same time. Lee Jae-myung and Park Young-jin fought over the responsibility of local elections at the Democratic Party of Korea's election candidate debate, which became a one-on-one structure. Park demanded an apology for the defeat of the ruling party, saying, "Politics is not a struggle for interpretation over the outcome, but is responsible." Candidate Park criticized, Lee Jae-myung said he would run for InGilBang to lead the local elections nationwide and elect talented people, but when I checked, an important leader of the party was forced to run, but he actually asked for his candidacy. He added, North Jeolla Province Governor Kim Kwon-young left Jeonbuk and came to the InGilBang area for support. Candidate Lee Jae-myung explained, "I don't know how much Governor Kim's support campaign affected the election, but I didn't know at the time." He countered, "The people who filmed me during the presidential election did not come to the polls in despair, so I thought jumping into the election campaign was a means of getting them out." Candidate Park said, I am frustrated and the people are upset because I keep saying there are many other interpretations without an apology. At the beginning of the debate, the two candidates also showed a subtle war of nerves during a common question session that mentioned the strengths of their opponents. Candidate Park said, "What I lack is a strong supporter of candidate Lee Jae-myung," adding, "Lee Jae-myung said he has no organization, but in my opinion, there is a supporter who is a more reliable dog-daughter than the Great Wall." Former President Moon's wife, Kim Young-suk, sued a single protester who threatened people around her with a weapon in front of her residence in Yangsan, Gyeongsang-namdo. According to Yangsan Police Station in Gyeongsang-namdo on the 16th, Kim Young-suk visited Yangsan Police Station the afternoon before and filed a complaint against one-person protester A on charges of intimidation. It was the first time that former President Moon's wife, Kim Young-suk, filed a complaint directly against a protester. Mr. A reportedly approached former President Moon and his wife, who came out for a walk in Pyeongsan village the previous day, and made insulting remarks such as crawling out of nowhere without fear xxxx. In the morning of that day, A reportedly made a fuss and cursed while preparing for a one-man protest in front of his residence, and threatened former President Moon's secretary with a cutter knife. A was arrested as a current criminal by the police who were dispatched after receiving a resident report. A, who has an address in Gyeonggi-do Province, has been renting a motel in front of Tongdosa Temple or a village near Pyeongsan village since former President Moon and his wife returned home, and has been commuting to Pyeongsan village every day for more than 3 months. A police official said, "We have caught A and are investigating the exact circumstances of the crime." Democratic Party lawmaker Ko Min-young questioned the political power of former party leader Lee Jun-sok. His fault is that he is dragging everyone into the swamp at gunpoint, saying he will kill each other while moving on. On top of that, it is a problem that elementary school students do not hesitate to express their emotions without hesitation. On the press conference of former party leader Lee Jun-sok on the radio broadcast on the 16th, KOH pointed out, "I think I showed a politician who should be avoided. Politics is very important in terms of the ability to embrace me and others," he said. If party leader Lee Jun-sok had received a lot of support and went there, it was a huge mistake not to integrate it into one, whether it was Yoon Nuclear Kwan or lawmakers with established power. Lawmaker KO judged that former Representative Lee Jun-sok still lacks knowledge, saying, "Sometimes you need to practice hiding your feelings, but even though you were the leader of the party, you still have a lot of room for improvement." Most of all, suspicions about his sexual favors have not been resolved cleanly, but I think it will still be difficult for the people to persuade the inside of the party, he said. When the host said, "There is an assessment that former party leader Lee Jun-sok directly attacked the president, perhaps a counterattack to the expression of internal party leader, Rep. Lee Jun-sok criticized the former party leader, saying, "It is very wrong. There may be various opinions before the decision is made, but I think it is very important to form a unified team after the decision is made," KOH said, adding, "No matter how much you put a knife or gun on yourself, the people would have applauded Lee Jun-sok more, but if you put a gun at each other, it will be a fight. As a result," he said, "we will witness a phenomenon in which the people are very fed up," adding, "I think it was an act of dragging everyone into a swamp," adding, "I can't understand the behavior of former party leader Lee Jun-sok, the power of the ruling people, even with the eyes of opposition lawmakers." It has been confirmed that the Dosan Ahn Chongho vessel, the first 3,000-ton submarine equipped with a submarine-launched ballistic missile, has been deployed to protect our territorial waters since it entered service last year. Last week, the Navy deployed a ship that went bankrupt. The ship was launched in 2018 and entered the Navy in August 2021 and was undergoing a process of electrification for about a year, and was recently completed and deployed. The Dosan Ahn Chongho class is Korea's first 3,000-ton submarine, and unlike Jang Bago class and Sun 1 class, which were built by introducing German technology, all of them were made of Korean technology from design to construction. Although it is a conventional method, not a nuclear propulsion system, it can operate underwater for several weeks by being equipped with an air-insoluble propulsion system (IP). It is equipped with 6 vertical launchers, which can launch SLBMs, to sneak into the sea near the enemy's country and hit its target with precision. The SLBM, developed by the South Korean military and mounted on the Dosan Ahn Chongho ship, was built based on Hyunmoo-2 ballistic missiles. Although the Korean Navy currently has Hyunmoo-3 cruise missiles in its first-class Sun 1 submarine, the original cruise missiles have low flight speed and heavy weight limitations on warheads that can be mounted instead of secretly approaching targets. On the contrary, ballistic missiles are easier to detect than cruise missiles because they can carry heavier warheads and fly in parabola instead of flying faster. For this reason, the military has both and chooses one by considering what targets should be hit comprehensively. Powerful countries with SLBMs carry nuclear weapons and use them to retaliate against the enemy in the event of an unexpected situation, such as a nuclear attack, while carrying out patrol missions. Because the ocean is wide and submarines are very difficult to detect, as a result, no country can make a preemptive nuclear attack on other countries. It's because we don't know when or where we'll be retaliated. Submarines with these advantages have not only the utility of being able to move very stealthily in terms of operations, but also the strategic meaning of being able to monitor and prevent war from occurring from the beginning. Currently, the Navy is sending submarines to the deep sea to monitor the infiltration of submarines from neighboring countries, including North Korea. Of course, since we do not have nuclear weapons, we cannot be as capable as the submarines of the great powers. A military official said, "We can use the fact that a submarine equipped with SLBM is in the nearby sea to warn enemy countries and exert deterrence in case of emergency," adding, "It cannot be like a US submarine operating around the world with nuclear weapons, but it is symbolic that such a submarine with SLBM capability is operating in the nearby sea." Interest rates on mortgage loans in the banking sector are expected to rise sharply. This is because the COFIX index in July, the standard for floating interest rates on mortgage loans, rose 0.52% points from the previous month. On the 13th of last month, the Bank of Korea's Monetary Policy Committee took a big step of raising the key interest rate by 0.5 percentage points at once for the first time in history, which has begun to be reflected in commercial bank loan rates. Interest bombs on borrowers with variable interest rates are expected to become a reality. The Korea Federation of Banks announced on the 16th that the COFIX in July based on new handling amounts rose 0.52% points from the previous month to 2.90%. It is the highest in 9 years since 2.85% in March 2013. The 0.52% point increase is also the largest since the Korea Federation of Banks announced COFIX based on new handling amounts in January 2010. It broke the record for the largest increase of 0.4 percentage points in the previous month in a month. COFIX is a weighted average interest rate on funds raised by 8 domestic banks, reflecting changes in interest rates on receiving products such as deposits, installment savings, and bank bonds actually handled by commercial banks. As interest rates on deposits rose to the 3% range last month, banks' financing costs, or costs, for loans have risen, and interest rates on loans have also risen accordingly. The floating interest rate of commercial banks' mortgage loans will also be raised immediately from the 17th. Kookmin Bank will raise the floating rate of mortgage loans from 3.92 to 5.32% per year from 4.44 to 5.84%, Woori Bank from 4.79 to 5.59% per year from 5.31 to 6.11%, and Nongyeop Bank from 4.01 to 5.01% per year to 4.53 to 5.53% per year. The Michihal police station in Incheon said on the 16th that it has arrested and is investigating 2 middle school students, including 14-year-old A, on charges of special robbery. They are accused of assaulting a woman in her 20s, a clerk, B, at a convenience store in Michihal-gu that afternoon and stealing some 200,000 won in cash from a moneykin at the store counter. At the time of the crime, one of the gang forced B out of the counter by asking for the location of a specific product, and then strangled him and assaulted him. Meanwhile, another stole money from an empty counter. However, their crimes were discovered by a citizen who entered the convenience store. The citizen who witnessed the crime quickly caught A. The other escaped, but was arrested near a convenience store 30 minutes later by police at a nearby district police station. It is reported that A's group is over 14 years old and is not considered a boy under the law. During the police investigation, they stated to the effect that I committed the crime because I needed money. A police official said, "We plan to review whether to apply for arrest warrants for A and others after conducting further investigations." Special robbery is a crime established when it is recognized that a group of 2 or more people is divided in the process of extorting other people's property or acquiring other property interests. The level of punishment is higher than that of general robbery, and if you are a habitual offender, you can be sentenced to more than 10 years in prison or life imprisonment. A mother in her 20s who left her child unattended to die and dumped her in a garbage bag was sentenced to probation. The Gwangju District Court announced on the 16th that it has sentenced A, who was indicted on charges of infanticide and abandonment of the body, to 2 years in prison and 3 years of probation. The court also ordered A to ban 160 hours of community service in the operation, employment, and virtually labor provision of child-related institutions for 5 years. On May 27 last year, A was handed over to trial on charges of neglecting and killing a child born in the bathroom of his home in Yasu, Jeollanam-do. As a result of the investigation, A gave birth to a child while unmarried, and committed the crime because he was afraid of being known to his parents and boyfriend. At the time, A wrapped the newborn in pants, put it in a garbage bag, dumped it in a specific space inside the house, and turned himself into the police after hearing from a friend who lived with him/her that it smelled bad. A reportedly stated in a police investigation to the effect that he committed the crime after suffering from an unwanted pregnancy and childbirth. A person's life is a value that cannot be given up in any case and must be absolutely protected, the court said. The defendant not only pressed the neck of the newborn victim to death, but also abandoned the body, so the crime is never light. However, he said, the defendant considered the fact that his intellectual ability was delayed considerably compared to his real-life age, that he was in a state of general development disorder, that led to the crime from extreme physical exhaustion and mental excitement, and that he was a first-time offender with no criminal history. Police filed for arrest warrants for YouTubers who raised suspicions of fraudulent elections at a polling station in Incheon during the presidential election in March and blocked the transfer of ballot boxes ahead of the ballot counting. The Incheon Metropolitan Police Agency's Metropolitan Investigation Team said on the 16th that it has applied for arrest warrants for 2 YouTubers, including A, for obstructing the transfer of ballot boxes while claiming allegations of fraudulent elections in Incheon. The police also booked 4 officials of the Garo Zero Research Institute, a conservative YouTube channel, including B, on the same charge without detention. According to the police, A and others are suspected of obstructing election work by blocking the transfer of ballot boxes from the parking lot of the ticket counting center in Bupyeong-gu, Incheon, at around 8 p.m. on March 9. They confronted voting officials for more than 8 hours until 4:30 a.m. the next day after raising suspicions of fraudulent elections, saying that someone carried the ballot box. In a police investigation, A and others stated, "We blocked the transfer of the ballot box due to suspicion of fraudulent elections." According to Article 244 of the Public Official Election Act, those who assault, threaten, or damage, or steal ballots, such as election officials, voting officials, etc. are punished by imprisonment for not less than 1 year but not more than 5 million won and not more than 30 million won. However, the court dismissed all arrest warrants against them. The Incheon District Court explained the reason for the dismissal, saying that it seems that considerable evidence has been secured through extensive investigations, and that it is difficult to admit the reason for the arrest and necessity of the suspect. In a weather commentary released at 4:20 a.m. on the 15th, the Korea Meteorological Administration predicted that it would rain heavily in the central region from the afternoon of that day. However, based on the metropolitan area, the rain did not start even after 4 p.m. that day. Then, in the weather commentary updated at 4:30 p.m., the Korea Meteorological Administration delayed the time of rain between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., and reduced the precipitation in the Seoul metropolitan area to 20 to 80 millimeters. Based on Seoul, strong rain began to pour with gusts from around 6:30 p.m., and the Korea Meteorological Administration's forecast seemed to meet. However, it only rained for 10 to 20 minutes. In the weather information re-announced at 8:30 p.m., the Korea Meteorological Administration changed the precipitation in Seoul, Incheon, and northern Gyeonggi province to around 5 millimeters, and lifted the preliminary heavy rain warning. The final rainfall in Seoul was only 0.9 millimeters. Complaints about the accuracy of the forecast by the Korea Meteorological Administration are exploding. Many citizens did not blame the Korea Meteorological Administration as the heavy rain, which had recently recovered from large-scale floods, was weather-related. However, as the forecast for the Liberation Day holiday was missed, there are voices of criticism against the Korea Meteorological Administration. This is because many people cancelled their trip believing in the Korea Meteorological Administration's forecast during the Golden Week of Liberation Day. In a weather commentary released earlier at 4 a.m. on the 13th, the first day of the holiday, the Korea Meteorological Administration also predicted that rain will begin in the Seoul metropolitan area on the morning of the 13th and that precipitation in the central region will reach up to 150 millimeters by the 14th. In particular, from the afternoon of the 13th, it was predicted that there would be very strong rain of 30 to 50 millimeters per hour accompanied by thunder and lightning along with gusts. However, the rain, which had been briefly falling on the morning of the 13th, stopped in the afternoon, and from the 14th, although there were occasional showers, mostly sunny weather continued. In fact, Seoul's precipitation on the 13th and 14th was only 4 millimeters and 3 millimeters. The combined precipitation during the 3-day holiday period is less than 8 millimeters. Regarding the change in the timing and forecast of precipitation in the Seoul metropolitan area on the 15th, an official from the Korea Meteorological Administration said, "We sprayed strong rain in the metropolitan area for a short time as expected, but precipitation is being concentrated in Jeonbuk and southern regions. In summer, the atmospheric instability is high, so the precipitation area is very narrow, and it passes quickly or stays for a long time," he said. It is true that the predictive performance is a little lower than other seasons. A series of complaints were posted on the Korea Meteorological Administration's bulletin board due to the wrong forecast during the holiday season. One netizen protested in a post on the 15th, saying, "I was excited about heavy rain from the evening of the Seoul metropolitan area today, and it rarely rained," adding, "I heard it was raining a lot in the Seoul metropolitan area 2 to 3 days ago, but it seemed like I was screaming without any grounds." Another netizen said, "I lost 500,000 won because I didn't work because I trusted the forecast," adding, "There is no such forecast that I can't meet today's weather in the morning. It's awkward to call it a broadcast," he criticized. There are also frequent claims that the Korea Meteorological Administration should be dismantled. People who planned vacation or hobby activities for the Golden Week continued to complain. A, who lives in Gwanak-gu, Seoul, cancelled his plan to go on vacation to Hongcheon Valley in Gangwon-do during the holiday season on the news of heavy rain. Mr. A said, "It was my fault that I trusted the Korea Meteorological Administration," adding, "I was angry when I was watching the weather at home. The business community is voicing the urgent need to overhaul not only corporate tax but also the inheritance tax system in order to increase corporate competitiveness. This is due to criticism that the inheritance tax rate, which is the highest among OECD member countries, is reducing the will to manage companies. Currently, half of the 38 OECD countries do not impose inheritance taxes. The Federation of Korean Industries, which represents the business community, announced on the 17th that it delivered an opinion to improve the inheritance tax system to support smooth corporate succession to the Ministry of Strategy and Finance on the 8th. The main improvement tasks proposed by the FKI are lowering the inheritance tax rate, abolishing the premium evaluation of the largest shareholder, expanding companies subject to family business inheritance deductions, and changing the taxation system. Currently, Korea's highest inheritance tax rate is 50%, and when a company succeeds, the tax rate rises to 60% if it is taxed by adding 20% to the stock price of the largest shareholder. The Federation of Korean Industries pointed out, the burden of inheritance tax in Korea is excessively higher than that of major overseas countries, which is feared to reduce corporate management vitality and competitiveness. According to the Federation of Korean Industries, 20 countries, or half of the 38 OECD countries, do not impose inheritance taxes on direct descendants. Among the remaining 18 countries, Korea's highest inheritance tax rate is the second highest after Japan's 55%, and it is the highest among OECD countries when the largest shareholder's stock premium is applied. The share of inheritance tax in total tax revenue has also continued to increase recently, about 1.5 times the OECD average. Many point out that inheritance tax is double taxation because additional taxation is made in the process of inheriting accumulated wealth after taxing income tax. In particular, the FKI points out that Korea has a high income tax rate and inheritance tax rate, and that the tax burden due to punitive taxation on wealth is heavy. Major foreign countries do not impose inheritance taxes or apply reduced tax rates to direct descendants to support corporate succession. On the other hand, Korea imposes an inheritance tax of up to 60% uniformly without distinguishing the relationship between heirs and heirs, which is contrary to the global trend. In response, the FKI proposed a plan to reduce the maximum inheritance tax rate to 30% of the OECD average in the short term and reduce the tax base section from the current 5th to 3rd. The average inheritance tax rate in 18 OECD countries, which imposes inheritance tax on direct descendants, is 27.1%. The FKI argued that inheritance tax should be abolished in the mid to long term and converted to capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is a system in which the inheritee's property is equivalent to capital gains that have not yet been realized, and is taxed on profits generated when the heir disposes of the inherited property in the future. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand abolished the inheritance tax and converted to capital gains tax. Chinese electric vehicles, which benefit from subsidies at the same level as domestic electric vehicles, are rapidly increasing their market share in Korea with their price competitiveness. Although the Korean people's taxes make companies in other countries full, they cannot implement a subsidy policy excluding certain countries due to concerns over trade disputes. As a solution, some say that areas with advanced domestic technology such as charging capacity, charging speed, and electrical equipment should be included in the subsidy payment criteria. According to the report titled Analyze New Registration Status in the First Half of 2022 released by the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association on the 16th, sales of Chinese electric commercial vehicles increased 750% from 159 in the first half of last year to 1,351 in the first half of this year. In particular, 436 Chinese electric buses were sold in the first half of this year, accounting for 47.8%, nearly half of the total electric bus sales. The domestic market share of Chinese electric commercial vehicles also rose from 1.1% last year to 6.8%. The unit price of Chinese buses is in the early 200 million won range, which is much cheaper than that of Korea, which is in the mid 300 million won range. On top of that, if you receive 140 million won, the maximum amount of electric bus purchase subsidies, the price difference that buyers feel will increase. The Ministry of Environment is providing subsidies if certain performance standards are met regardless of the manufacturing country in accordance with the guidelines for subsidizing electric vehicle supply projects. In the case of local subsidies, there are differences between local governments, and in the case of Seoul, subsidies of up to 70 million won are provided. An official from the Ministry of Environment explained, domestic and foreign products do not have a structure that discriminates against subsidies, but a system that does not support subsidies or provides less depending on the performance of vehicles. For the government, it is necessary to foster the domestic electric vehicle industry while expanding the supply of electric vehicles, but it cannot unilaterally subsidize domestic industries or exclude certain countries such as China from the subsidy policy. In this case, there is a possibility of trade disputes. According to the WTO subsidy agreement regulations, if a subsidy supported by a specific country has specificity, the other country may impose countervailing tariffs. Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon, who is about to recommend a candidate for the Prosecutor General, said, "I will recommend someone who has the will and ability to properly eradicate crimes. I thank the Prosecutor General Candidate Recommendation Committee for recommending good people, Minister Han said after the 45th Prosecutor General Candidates election meeting held at the Ministry of Justice Government Complex on the afternoon of the 16th. We will prepare to make a recommendation soon based on the recommendation results. He also said, we will recommend someone with the will and ability to properly fight crimes by keeping justice and common sense, adding, we have not yet decided on a specific schedule for the recommendation. On this day, the recommendation committee recommended 4 prosecutors: Yeo Won-sop, head of the Legal Research Institute, Kim Hoo-gon, head of the Seoul High Prosecutor's Office, Lee Do-bong, and Lee Won-sok, Deputy Prosecutor of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, to Minister of Justice Han Dong-hoon. The recommendation committee explained, we selected 4 candidates for the Prosecutor General who will protect the prosecution's political neutrality and fairness with a firm commitment to fairness and justice, and recommended them to the Justice Minister. Kim Jin-tae, former Prosecutor General, the chairman of the recommendation committee, told reporters shortly after the meeting, we tried to select a person who could serve as the Prosecutor General with conviction, adding, it was decided without disagreement because the majority of the members agreed. Based on the recommendations, Han will nominate the final candidate to President Yoon Seok-Yeol. Afterwards, the candidate is expected to officially take office in the middle of next month after a confirmation hearing at the National Assembly. Parliamentary consent is not required. Prosecutors investigating allegations of deletion and manipulation of records in the West Sea official shooting case raided the homes of former National Intelligence Service Director Park Ji-won, former Defense Minister Seo Wook, and former National Security Office Director Seo Hoon on the 16th. The prosecution, which launched a simultaneous forced investigation, is expected to summon those responsible for the case after completing the analysis of the confiscated materials. According to the legal community, the First Public Investigation Division of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office has sent prosecutors and investigators to the homes of former Director Park, former Minister Seo, and former Chief Seo to secure evidence related to the case. Former Director Park is accused of unauthorized deletion of intelligence-related reports when Lee Dae-Jung, a public official at the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, was killed by the North Korean military on September 22, 2020. According to the NIS own investigation, an NIS employee wrote an internal intelligence report stating that Lee was likely to have drifted rather than gone to North Korea on his own, and Park ordered him to delete it. Former Minister Seo was accused by Lee's bereaved family of ordering the deletion of military secrets containing wiretapping information. The NIS and others believe that confidential information in the MIMS, a military integrated information processing system of the NIS and the Ministry of National Defense, was deleted before and after the 2 related ministers' meetings held at 1 a.m. and 10 a.m. on September 23, 2020. The meeting was attended by former Director Park, former Defense Minister Seo Wook, former Chief of Security Seo Hoon, former Chief of Staff Ro Young-min, and former Unification Minister Lee In-young. The prosecution is also investigating allegations that Chung Wa-dae and government officials at the time mauled North Korea to cover up the case. According to the minutes of the National Assembly's National Defense Committee on September 24, 2020, former Defense Minister Seo Wook said, we gave guidelines to Kang Dae-sik, a lawmaker of the People's Power, saying, we need to see if there is a possibility of North Korea. The prosecution is expected to summon former NIS Chief Park Ji-won and former Defense Minister Seo Wook after analyzing the confiscated materials. It was found that 7 out of 10 Koreans regard smartphones as an essential medium for daily life. On the other hand, only 27% of the respondents considered TV a must. According to the Smartphone, TV Replacement Speed by Generation report by the Information and Communication Policy Research Institute on the 16th, 70.3% of respondents chose smartphones as an essential medium for daily life. According to the 2016 survey, the figure increased by 14.8% compared to 55.5%. 27.1% of respondents chose TV as an essential medium, down 11.5 percentage points from 2016. Only 0.1% of teenagers chose TV as an essential medium. Those in their 20s and 30s also chose 4.5% and 9.2%, respectively, only less than 10%. On the other hand, 96.9% of teenagers said smartphones were essential media, while 92.2% and 85.1% of those in their 20s and 30s, respectively. People in their 40s and 50s also had high preference for smartphones. The respondents who chose smartphones were 84.3% and 70.4%, respectively, far exceeding 12.6% and 29.1%, respectively. 44.1% of respondents in their 60s said they prefer smartphones, lower than 54.3% of TVs. However, in a 2016 survey, TV preferences reached 79.2%, about 4.5 times that of smartphone preferences 17.6%. Every year, the gap between TVs and smartphones is greatly narrowing. Smartphone usage time averaged 122.9 minutes per day, up 23.9 minutes from 99 minutes in 2016. TV viewing time averaged 175.1 minutes per day, up 12.5 minutes over the same period. Smartphone usage time recorded an increase in all age groups. However, TV viewing time has decreased among those in their 30s and younger. In particular, teenagers spend an average of 66.1 minutes per day watching TV, which is less than half of 170.3 minutes using smartphones. The proportion of people with smartphones has been steadily increasing from 57.5% in 2012 to 83.3% in 2016 and 93.4% in 2021. The percentage of smartphones in their 50s and younger exceeded 98% last year. The smartphone ownership rate of those in their 60s reaches 91.7%. 60.1% of those aged 70 or older, up 3.4 times from 17.6% in 2016. An official from the Korea Institute for Information and Communication Policy said, the influence of smartphones is spreading to the elderly, adding, the speed of smartphones replacing TVs in terms of recognition is faster than usage time. China has conducted more than 100 military exercises in the West Sea, including the Bohai Sea, so far this year. This is an increase of more than 30% compared to 77 cases in the same period last year, which is interpreted as a move to expand the maritime power in the West Sea ahead of Xi Jinping's third consecutive term. China's Liaoning, Shandong, Tianjin and Lianyun River Maritime Bureau, which have jurisdiction over the West Sea and Bohai Sea, confirmed a ban on military activities on its website, and the Chinese authorities announced a total of 100 times by the 15th. 25 of them were live-fire drills. It is estimated that the number of drills, including actual maritime patrols, will be much higher. The Chinese military also conducted exercises in waters near 124 degrees east of Tokyo in the West Sea, which it claims is its operational boundary. On March 20, the Shandong Maritime Bureau set the area as a no-navigation zone, saying it would fire live ammunition at the eastern boundary of 124 degrees east of Tokyo. This area is pollution under international law. However, the Chinese military has warned by installing buoys near the 124-degree line in Tokyo or by asking the South Korean ship to leave its operational zone if it moves 124 degrees west. Regarding the expansion of the Chinese military's training in the West Sea, diplomatic circles are likely to analyze that it intends to establish effective control in preparation for the future definition of the maritime border between South Korea and the U.S. Since Xi took power, China has developed a anti-access, regional rejection strategy that strengthens its missile strike capabilities, naval and air capabilities, and blocks U.S. military access away from existing coastal defenses. The Chinese military's expansion of the West Sea training also included its intention to secure the western part of the 124-degree line of Tokyo as its own sovereignty. In 2013, the then Chinese naval commander asked the South Korean Navy chief, who visited China, to never cross the 124-degree east longitude and operate. In response, the South Korean Navy Chief of Staff countered that the area is international under international law and that an exploratory operation is needed to prevent bypass intrusion by North Korean spy ships. However, the Chinese warship reportedly strengthened its reconnaissance and training on the 123 to 124-degree east longitude. According to the Chinese Maritime Bureau, China will conduct a total of 6 military exercises and live-fire rounds at 123 to 124 degrees east of Tokyo this year. On March 20, an area 12 times the area of Seoul, between 123 and 124 degrees east of Tokyo, was set as a 14-hour no-sail zone. The reason why China has started to strengthen its effective control over the 124th parallel is that China's claim to the 124th parallel has no legal basis. Korea and China have not decided the maritime boundary of the West Sea so far. If the 124-degree line of Tokyo is solidified as a boundary line, 70% of the West Sea will be under China's jurisdiction. A senior government official predicted, if the conflict between South Korea and China continues to grow, China is likely to surface the 124 leadership issue around next year after Xi Jinping's third consecutive term is confirmed. While South Korea and China have yet to define the maritime border in the West Sea, the Chinese military is unilaterally claiming it and moving to carry it out against South Korea. The South Korean government says it will never allow more than 70% of the West Sea to enter China's jurisdiction if it borders 124 degrees east longitude. Japan's crisis, which has been mired in a prolonged recession, is intensifying. There are a series of indicators showing that national power is deteriorating. With the first decline in the population of the metropolitan area amid the low birth rate and aging population, GDP, a major economic indicator, is in a position to be reversed by Korea, and national debt is the second highest in the world after Venezuela, which is more serious than at the end of World War II. First of all, Japan's population cliff crisis, one of the world's most serious low birth and aging countries, is becoming more serious. Concerns are rising that the population will not only decrease for the 13th consecutive year, but also the population of the metropolitan area, including Tokyo, will also lose its growth engine. As of January 1, 2022, which was announced by the Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications based on the basic resident register this month, the total Japanese population was 123,223,561 people, down 0.5% from the previous year. This is the 13th consecutive year of decline and the largest ever decline of 619,140, according to Japan's Jiji news agency. Last year, the number of Japanese born was 812,036, a record low for the sixth consecutive year. The natural decrease in the number of deaths exceeding the number of births expanded to 629,703. Even the population of the Seoul metropolitan area is decreasing. The Nihon Keizai Shimbun analyzed that with the rapid aging of the low birth rate, even the metropolitan area, where there is an influx of population from the provinces, cannot maintain population growth. The number of Japanese in the Tokyo area, which has continued to increase so far, fell 0.1% to 34,498 due to the decrease in the number of births, to a total of 35,611,115, the first decline since the survey began in 1975. Nikkei reported that the number of Japanese living in the Seoul metropolitan area turned to a decline, with the largest population in Tokyo falling 0.15% year-on-year to 13,277,052, which is less than the previous year in 26 years. Tokyo saw 32,878 deaths minus births, 11,870 more than the previous year. The number of social increases, excluding transfers, was only 12,841 people, which did not compensate for the natural decline. However, the proportion of the population in the metropolitan area, centered on Tokyo, accounted for 28.9% in 2022, up from 28.8% a year earlier. Although the movement to attract population to Tokyo has weakened, Nikkei pointed out that the population still tends to be concentrated in urban areas centered on the metropolitan area. The provinces are more serious due to the double whammy of natural decline and population outflow. 3 northeastern prefectures, including Aomori, Iwate, and Akita, continued to experience a population decline of more than 1%. Only 4 prefectures, including Yamanashi, Miyazaki, Kumamoto, and Kagoshima, saw their population decline from the previous year. Compared to the metropolitan area, the population decline in the provinces is relatively larger, so it is inevitable to review the urban model according to the number of people. In particular, it is pointed out that measures are urgently needed to prevent low birth rates and curb population outflows, as cities with low birth rates and aging populations are feared to be unable to maintain infrastructure on the premise of having a certain population. The Japanese government saw the main cause of the population decline as a decrease in births, and in April, it established a Children's Family Administration that handles childbirth and childcare policies and prepared measures such as increasing various subsidies such as childbirth celebrations. Thank you for watching today. Please subscribe and like.